Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Henwood, and I am the Vice President of Inventory Management at Levi's out here in San Francisco. I'm a 1995 Penn State grad from business logistics, which was, I guess, the predecessor to the supply chain program. So I used to TA for Dr. Novak at University Park in BLog 301. And I think that's probably the equivalent now of SCM 301.
Yeah,
so
same
so
thing.
thrilled
Yeah.
to be speaking with you guys. Yeah. Um, I've basically worked in logistics for and supply chain for 26 plus years now. Went and got my MBA after working for Nabisco for 3.5 years in supply chain. Graduated with the MBA from Cornell in operations in 2000, and then have been consulting at PricewaterhouseCoopers, worked in high tech, and have been in apparel for the past 16 years. And it's been just a wonderful ride, and I really do credit my Penn State education for one, being continuously employed since I graduated. Two, for having, I think, really cutting edge understanding of supply chain dynamics, which has been critical not only through the 26 years, but especially in the past 13 months, when things like a bullwhip effect or things like global disruptions to a supply chain really bring into consideration things like sourcing strategies and inventory strategies and distribution strategies. We've seen it all in the past 13 months and how critical it is to be a good supply chain, a solid supply chain. You may have heard that companies with great supply chains have an advantage in the marketplace, and this year is really proving it. So that's kind of my background. Just so you know, at Penn State, I was a Lion ambassador. I was in student counseling. I was in the interfraternity system. So I did want to put that out there as well, just to kind of humanize my Penn State experience as well. So anyway, that's my background.
All right, Joe. Thanks for that. So given this week, we're going to talk about inventory control. Could you discuss, what it means from an inventory controls perspective within the apparel industry and supply chain industry, and and most importantly, how has the pandemic and if you had any kind of impact from the Suez Canal debacle?
Yes, there's been a lot of impact from the Suez Canal debacle. Before I get to that, let me kind of hit you with some of the inventory control methods. And I think the first thing is making sure that you have your inventory under control. And there's really a couple things that we use. One is turn. And so turn is a financial metric. You can also use it as a unit control metric. And it really it's a simple formula. It's your total sales, whether it's your unit sales or your cost inventory sales, over your average inventory position, right? So you guys probably know what turn is. And the reason that turn is good for inventory control is that it shows you how quickly you're moving through your inventory position. When you buy inventory, it is typically the number one asset of any company that sells goods. And so you want to make sure that you're getting a return on that investment. And so when you tie up more dollars than you need to in your inventory positions, what you wind up doing is constraining your cash flow for other investments. You may not be able to implement an ERP system or a new planning system, or you may not be able to spend money on marketing if you put too much money into your inventory position. So one, we use turn to make sure that we are not investing too much in our inventory. The flip side of that, you want to turn, but you also you don't want to keep your inventory too low. So the other metric that we use is fill rate. And of course, fill rate is simply if a customer orders a good, how many units of that order can you fulfill? And so you walk the line between saying, what's the target fill rate? And we typically like somewhere between a 92 to 95%. And I'll get to that in a moment in the apparel industry. And then we like to turn somewhere financially above a 3. So 3 times a year, we're turning over our full inventory with fill rates that are 92% plus. You may think that that is a very low fill rate, and you're probably right if you compare it to other industries such as consumer packaged goods. I worked for Nabisco and specifically in the Fleischmann's Bluebonnet and Parquet division, and we wouldn't take anything less than a 99% fill rate. The difference between the apparel industry and a lot of other industries is that your SKU, so this sweatshirt, for instance, I've got my Levi's sweatshirt on. This SKU isn't just a hooded sweatshirt. It is a hooded sweatshirt that comes in 6 sizes. So for every product that we sell or plan, we typically have anywhere between 6 sizes in tops and over 40 sizes in bottoms. And so when you get that sizing mix into the equation, it makes it much more difficult to plan your actual demand at the size level. And so you do have to bring down your fill rate assumptions a little bit to make sure that you're not over inventorying your business. So those are 2 key metrics, turn and fill rate. But then we also have some other inventory health metrics that I wanted to bring up with you guys. There's 2 health metrics that we talk about. One is excess and obsolete. And excess and obsolete to us is once you've looked at your inventory position and you've looked over a 6-month horizon, and that'll vary by business, but we use 6 months, over a 6-month horizon at your sales, how much more inventory do you have at the product code level? And so if we have more inventory than forecast over 6 months, we'll call that excess. If the product is going into an end of life position, we'll call that obsolete. And so we try to keep our excess and obsolete positions below 15% of our total inventory. Again, that may seem rather high at the apparel level, but it's a reasonable number given the size variation. So that's one. The second metric that we often look at is aged inventory. And aged inventory may sound a lot like excess and obsolete, but it truly is how long has a product sat in your distribution centers without moving through the units. So they're just sitting in a distribution center location. And it's different from excess and obsolete in 2 ways. One, it's age rather than forecast. And 2, it can indicate another problem, which is that you're not using an effective FIFO method of inventory management, which is your first in, first out. That's typically what you like to see in the apparel industry, but that doesn't always works. For some reason, products might be on hold. For some reasons, your warehouse management systems may optimize picking locations, and there's maybe some picking locations towards the back of the warehouse that just don't get worked into the optimized logic for the workers to move through. So it's a sometimes you use a pseudo first in, first out, and you compromise with the efficiencies of the distribution center workers, and that can lead to aged inventory. So those are the 4 metrics that we really use. And again, turn, fill rate, aged inventory, and excess and obsolete. That's what we like to use in the apparel industry. Dr. Goldstone, how did I do on that? Any metrics that you want me to hit on specifically, or are those good?
Those are good. Those are good, and those are the things that we talk about within the class. How has the Suez Canal impacted you, if any?
So the Suez Canal. Let me tell you, this is between COVID and the Suez Canal, and I'll expand beyond the Suez Canal just to set the context. One, the entire Asia Pacific vendor base is running into problems. We've had port slowdowns in Sri Lanka, Singapore, Hong Kong. And that may not seem like a lot of countries, but your Cambodia and Vietnam go through Hong Kong. Your Bangladesh, Sri Lanka go through Singapore and Sri Lanka. So your entire vendor base from India towards the Philippines into the West Coast port of the US has been significantly slowed down. We're going to say because of COVID, but when we say COVID, we really mean a few things. One, we mean higher absenteeism. So that's a COVID impact, and it's specifically due to COVID. Two, we mean a slowdown in port procedures because of COVID. Your safety regulations are causing a little delays. And then three is probably the most interesting, and I love this for supply chain. Everybody pulled back on goods back in April, May, June. And what we found out is that the commercial world did not slow down its demand. And so all of a sudden there was a massive influx of orders into these factories. And what was really interesting about that is that there weren't containers moving back from the commercial hubs of the world into the Asia vendors. And so we literally do not have enough containers right now to move all of the goods out of Vietnam, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and get them to the US, Canada, Mexico, Europe. And so the container shortage is the third COVID impact that's impacting the Asia. You get all of that combined with a port slowdown in LA, Long Beach, and that port slowdown right now is somewhere between 10 days and 2 weeks. And you've already had a disruption, okay, due to COVID. So what did that do? That basically said everything coming out of the west coast of India through Pakistan, Ethiopia, South Africa, Egypt, Turkey, all those countries which had a choice, well, specifically Pakistan and India, had a choice to go to the East Coast, West Coast of the US, had already started sending their goods to the East Coast. And so all of a sudden the Suez became, it is a critical artery for global trade. It became even more of a critical artery for global trade because of what was happening in Asia and the port of Long Beach in LA. And then we get the Suez Canal trip. And so what's happened to us at this point, and we won't feel it for another couple of weeks, right? Usually we have a week's forward coverage. We've got some inventory in the US. This just happened 2 weeks ago. We won't feel the impact from the Suez Canal into stores, I think, until the end of April, perhaps into May. But we're losing at least 2 weeks of goods. That 2 weeks, it's millions of units of products, and that's just Levi's, right? So 10 to 12% of global trade goes through the Suez Canal. Those 2 weeks are critical because we had already been suffering from basically December. We'd been suffering because of the port of LA and the Asia port slowdowns. So this is really hitting the supply side of just about every market, every industry in the US, and it'll really start impacting us, like I said, towards mid to late April and into May. So it's going to be fairly devastating. Yeah. Any questions about that?
Yeah, any questions?
I actually have a question, if that's okay.
I was gonna call on you anyway. I was gonna call you next anyway, Ethan. So, all right. So, Ethan, ask your question. All right, and then tell him a little bit about your celebration of scholarship topic.
I should probably turn on the camera for this. So let me find my webcam real quick, if that's
All
okay.
right.
So give me just like 2 seconds.
I see Joe, Ethan, he's so I always encourage people to disagree with some of my thoughts or check me on some of my things. And Ethan's the one who always has the discussion. So like I said, he has an interesting project that I was going to ask him to talk to you about. So
Fantastic.
he came up. So Ethan, ask your question. Like I said, tell Joe about the topic you're doing.
So I didn't really know what to do at first for the project until the incident with the Suez Canal, and that pretty much blew up everywhere all over the internet. So I was kind of curious, how could we prevent stuff like that from happening? So looking into it, I go on a bunch of Wikipedia pages, I start clicking links, I start going on all this type of research, and I find out that there's actually a lot of shipwrecks per year. And that's one of the bigger reasons on why there's so many delays, because the ships are literally getting stuck almost everywhere. I think 2020 had 189 shipwrecks in total. Now, when you think of a shipwreck, it's kind of, I don't want to give my whole presentation right now because I have to do that later, so no spoilers. But I was looking into how AI could kind of be implemented into maritime and see how beneficial it could be. I've already done a little bit of research, but I was wondering if you could somehow expand. Do you see any AI implications into maritime trade at all?
Yeah, it's a great hypothesis. And so I was part of an advisory committee on an AI project that looked at global supply chain disruptions. And specifically, so here's what it did. It would look at 40 different major newspapers in 40 different languages and analyze the words. And it went back as far as it could using microfiche and just online articles. What they tried to do was pick up on languages like natural disasters, hurricanes, those forecasts, strike language, political disruptions, terrorist activity, all those types of things. And they tried to predict where global disruptions would come from. This was 4 to 5 years ago. They found that they could increase the accuracy of prediction by 6%. And this is where it gets a little sticky. Like, what do you do with AI in these types of predictions? So they found that in general, we could predict with 80% accuracy where a global disruption would take place. And with AI, they could predict it with 86% accuracy. So a fairly significant, meaningful increase. But then you get the question, what does 6% improved accuracy of forecast of a global disruption or any disruption mean to your supply chain? What would you do with that information? Would you send your ships from Pakistan through the East Coast or West Coast? Would you send your ships through the Suez Canal or around the Horn of Africa, right? So these are the questions like, would you cost yourself 2 weeks based on a 6% improved accuracy in forecast? I don't know. But these are some of the this was initial artificial intelligence forecast. As they improve that, what if they got it to 10 or 12% or 15 or 20%, more accurate improvement? That to me, that's the staggering potential of AI. And, maybe if we could get more specific with tidal waves or earthquakes or political disruption, what if we pulled our sourcing out of Pakistan and put it in Bangladesh, or Bangladesh and put it in Mexico? If I had more insight into, Ethiopia, for instance, where there is some challenges right now, maybe I could prevent a couple-week delay of supply chain disruption for myself. So I do think there's a lot to AI. I think it's still in its nascent state, but it's coming on strong and it's coming on quick, and there's some real specific applications in maritime as a result. Hope that helps.
So you said that this was done 5 years ago, And with the amount of data that has been collected over, after those 5 years, do you say that we're at the state now where where that 6% increase could be much larger if we look at it today?
Yeah, and what I'll say is, that was 6% 5 years ago. I haven't followed up on that project. In fact, I think it kind of rolled under just from a funding standpoint. So, but let me take AI and tell you what we're doing today with it, because
I was trying to get that out.
I started, yeah. So I started using machine learning specifically, not necessarily AI, but machine learning and forecasting processes. And so we use this as a distribution forecast right now. So not a demand forecast, it's really a distribution forecast, so closer into the point of demand. And we have been using SaaS, not service as a software, but the actual SaaS company that is a major, algorithm player in the forecasting industry. And they've always been touted on how good their algorithms are. Bad workflow, great forecasting algorithms. We had a couple data scientists come in and worked for about 6 to 8 weeks with our data and look at the algorithm and started running machine learning on it. And within 8 weeks, they had taken this company that's been around for 20, 25 years with all these sophisticated algorithms across multiple industries, and they beat the forecast accuracy of SaaS by 12%, 14% in many cases. Every 1% of forecast accuracy improvement is typically millions of dollars in revenue for us. And so it was just staggering what machine learning could do from 2 data scientists that really had nothing to do with the business, who could come in and beat the algorithms that an established company of 25 years who'd been working in multiple industries could come up with. It just blew me away. So there are some very real implications coming through right now. And I do believe that companies that invest here will have the first leg up. It'll be a competitive advantage over the next 3 to 5 years. We'll see a shakeout as a result of machine learning.
Yeah. I'm not done with you, Ethan. So for the students here, and we see that the future, the business landscape is moving toward machine learning and artificial intelligence. And they hear me talk about this all the time, but I want them to hear it from someone else. What should they be doing in terms of where the future of business is going? Even if they're not going to be programmers, right? But what should they do as future leaders of organizations, as future employees of companies? Even whether or not they're going to be in the supply chain space, what should they be looking at right now?
Yeah, understand how data science works. Understand what machine learning is. There's always that. Just understand enough to have a conversation. Understand it enough that you're not worried about it. Taking your job or not leaving a place for you. Being able to speak the language, being able to appreciate what it can bring, being brave enough to stand side by side with the data scientists, knowing how to plug your supply chain knowledge into the scientists that are trying to solve the problems that you also are trying to solve. That's what you guys should be doing right now. You should be keeping tabs on AI and data science. For me, it's a perfect marriage between supply chain and analytics. If you look at the history of supply chain, it has always been one of those organizations or one of those functions that computing power and algorithms have gone after to make more effective. When I started out, everything was mainframe technology. We moved to the client server. We moved to more sophisticated algorithms, and it really did make the organizations more effective. you just need to be willing to partner with these guys. You need to know how to speak to the data scientists, and it will make you a more effective supply chain leader, because I do believe that machine learning is going to be the next big implementation wave for most supply chains.
Interesting. So this is a selfish question on my end. So how did you, what I'm trying to get at is like, you're the VP of Levi's, and how did you educate yourself, or how did you have your people explain AI and ML to you? Because you don't have to learn it, right? That's what you, in your position, you hire people to tell you what this stuff does, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in terms of leadership, that's why I explain it to people. It's like, to be a good leader, you have to put yourself in their shoes. You have to understand these concepts. It's just not as simple as, okay, I'm VP, now I tell everybody what to do. No, that's not leadership, that's management, right? So
Yep.
how did you go about, educating yourself on AI and ML?
Yeah, and I have to give credit to the leaders of my company. When Levi started looking at data science, we hired some of the best people in the industry. My boss actually engaged a university out here, and we partnered with them to train myself, my colleagues, my peers up on what machine learning was. So while we didn't need to be the experts, exactly what I just said, we did need to be informed, and we did need to know how to speak the language, and that did take some time investment to get up to speed. When you go into the industry, never stop learning. It's great to have a newspaper subscription just so you can keep in tune with what's going on. But for instance, right now I use LinkedIn Learning to learn what's going on with blockchain. I'm taking a course at UC Berkeley right now on blockchain, because that's my other hot supply chain topic. So we are trying to stay close to things. And by the way, I re-engaged with Penn State a few months ago, and it's been great having conversations with Dr. Goldston or Dr. Novak, and really understanding what's happening out there. So it's keep learning.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was one thing I was going to get to that as well. So I'm loving how this conversation is going. You all are kind of segued in. So Ethan, so back on your presentation. So Ethan, you said you didn't want to share too much about your presentation, but this is the best platform to show it. This is an interview, right? So it's like, so Joe, just to give you some background. So we do a thing called Celebration of Scholarship, where we're giving out an award. We're giving out an award for like best poster presentation. We're giving out one on diversity and inclusion. We have one on sustainability, and I'm letting the students pretty much do what they want to do. Yes, they can do it for those awards. Yes, it would be great if they would do a presentation and research based on supply chain. But I'm letting them do what they want to do. And Ethan did talk about AI and the Suez Canal to make this thing more relevant. Zach Moyer, he's actually doing Wall Street bets. So I was like, yes, I want to see that one. So that's what we're doing. And I'm saying that if you once you take your presentations, once you upload them on YouTube and they're going to be unlisted, I'm sending it out to people of the industry. This is a perfect example of what we're going to be doing. So Ethan, if you have any more information to share about your research, you can share it now. You don't have to show up. You don't have to bring your PowerPoint, but just like share about what you found in that research.
Yeah, I didn't complete the PowerPoint yet because I also have like 3 more presentations this week and a job interview. So it's been crazy. But I did find that the Suez Canal, interestingly enough, has been expanded almost twice its size since like 1960. So you see how thin it was from like the global. You see like satellite imaging on the canal, and you're probably like, why did they just make it bigger? It was such a big deal. Well, they have been for 50 years. It's twice the size it used to be, and the one event in which the ship was clogged, there was 30-mile-an-hour winds, which is like insane. Imagine piloting a ship in 30-mile-an-hour
I didn't know
wind.
that. Interesting.
Yeah, it's incredible how I'm surprised it didn't even topside, to be honest with you. And a lot of times they do. Unfortunately, not in major canals, but let's say like a ship crashes in the middle of the ocean, you still have to delay other ships crossing through there because over 200 of them have before in just last year alone. And you have to close off that whole area. You have to find survivors. The Coast Guard has to come out. It's a really sloppy thing all around whenever there's a shipwreck. So what I was thinking was, how could we implement AI into maritime navigation to kind of make it more accurate and a lot less human error? So I started digging into how AI is currently being used. And the most interesting thing I found, to keep it short, was they were supposed to launch a completely automated boat, which means there would be no human on board, across the Atlantic Ocean. And it's going to take the original path of the Mayflower from England all the way to I forget where the Mayflower landed. I think it was somewhere in New England actually, but yeah, Plymouth. So it's going to take that whole route, and it's just going to have AI on board. There's not going to be a single human for the entire duration of it, and that's really interesting. Unfortunately, that got delayed because of COVID, so it's actually happening later this month, I believe. So that should be a really fun thing to watch.
What website?
Yeah.
Is there a website where you found
I
that?
can find it. Yeah, I forget the name because I have so many notes in front of me, but it's let me read. I could put the article in the chat if it's open.
I don't think Penn State hadn't paid their bill, so I don't have a chat on here.
But yeah,
I have a question too about the Suez Canal, if I can jump in.
All right, let Ethan finish. I think he's still.
that's pretty much all I have to say right now for the presentation, and
Right.
I'll share the article at the
Yeah,
end.
send me that thing about the autonomous boat. I'm very interested in that one.
Yeah.
Joe, do you have any questions for Ethan?
I was going to ask if you saw anything about AI being used in weather forecasting, because we're talking about the winds and alternate routes. I'm thinking weather might be one of the biggest factors here that AI might be used to better predict things.
Yeah, like the wind. Yeah.
Yeah, the wind or the hurricanes or where weather patterns are moving towards.
Yeah. There should be a lot of data out there for that in terms of weather, in terms of the maritime industry.
If I may, I'm actually a licensed captain, so I work in the maritime industry.
Please continue.
So yeah, I'm a 100-ton master captain. I've worked in it for quite a few years privately though, on sport fishing boats, and unfortunately, I don't know, like just kill your thunder, but 30-mile an hour wind to these ships is relatively nothing, because it's not enough force to actually push these ships around too much. I mean, 30-mile-an-hour wind, yes, it does act like a big windsock, but it takes a lot more than 30-mile-an-hour wind to affect these ships' routing. Maybe you partner 50-mile-an-hour, 70-mile-an-hour winds with very strong currents, upwellings, large seas. Then you could have a recipe for a disaster. But just a ship going through the Suez Canal, say yes, 30-mile-an-hour winds. Okay, honestly, on a ship that large, autopilot will compensate for that to an extent.
So what do you think was the root cause for this? Because I don't know. I'm asking.
I personally think it was user error. I think it's the captain. Something went wrong there. I wholeheartedly think he messed. There was either horrible mechanical failure, like total engine loss, or something happened with the captain. He either wasn't paying attention to something, he fell asleep, he could have been intoxicated. Who knows? But as far as saying 30-mile-an-hour wind completely pushed the bow of the boat to the right side of the canal, I disagree with that personally, just from a experience standpoint. But as far as AI goes and predicting weather, there's not necessarily AI, I would say, more or less, but we have on at least all the boats that I've worked on from a micro level, we have satellite weather connected to all of our are GPSs. So at the touch of a button, I can pull up a complete satellite weather forecast, just like you'd see on the news regarding, okay, I have a storm 48 miles away from me, and I can see whether or not it's a thunderstorm, a lightning storm, what the wind is like inside the storm, which way the storm is going, and approximately how long before I'm going to be in it or where I need to go around it. So on a macro level of ships, they have that technology already. They can see when there's a storm, even 100 miles away from them. They can see where it's going. And I mean, they can also see, I mean, all of the bathymetric charts and the topography charts that are just on standard GPSs. They're going to have all of the um, directions of the tides and the currents. And as far as forecasting goes, it's just like forecasting the weather. I can see tomorrow what the wave height and the wind is going to be like 100 miles off in New Jersey.
Mm.
And Robert, I think you're bringing up a good point, which was kind of a little bit of the point I was trying to make with the previous AI, where the accuracy was improved from 80 to 86%. What is a little bit improvement worth to the maritime industry if, what if we had an extra day of advance notice, or what if, it was more accurate that it was moving from 50-mile-an-hour winds to 70-mile-an-hour winds? Would that change anything, and how much more, how much better would the information need to be for a different course of action to occur? It's a tough tipping point there, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, on a global scale, I mean, even 5% on a global scale is just a large amount in general. Um, but I mean, when I'm thinking of weather in the middle of the ocean and how important it is to know down to the minute what's going on, it's like if you've ever been in a tropical environment, you know that in 10 minutes it can go from being sunny to pouring rain and going back to sunny again. In an offshore environment, the same thing can happen. You can have because there's no barriers for a storm. There's no mountains. There's no landscape of any kind. It's just open water. So the storms move freely and very quickly.
Mm.
So within 10 minutes, you could be perfectly fine. It's beautiful out. To the wind starts to pick up, the swells start to increase 5-10 feet, and next thing you know, you're in the middle of a rainstorm. And then 10 minutes later, you could be out of it. So having any sort of advanced knowledge of weather, whether or not it's a day. I mean, if I had an extra day's notice to where I could say, okay, I know that 200 miles offshore in New Jersey and behind the Wilmington Canyon, there's going to be a thunderstorm is supposedly going to be moving through it'll be in the Wilmington Canyon between 1 and 3 p.m. Okay, well, if I'm heading north and I'm going to want to avoid that area, maybe I'll head a little bit more east, hug land a little bit more, go around the storm and go back up to pretty much plan the route better. I mean, any heads up is better than none. So that's just my opinion. I think it would help greatly. And
Yeah.
on a global scale, any improvement will be good improvement.
But Robert, and you think we already have all this data currently, correct? So
Yeah, the data's there.
yeah, interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that was very good. So you need that 1,000-foot view, right, from someone who's like the empirical experience. It's like that stuff you can't get in a book, right? And that's what I always talk about. You need that mixed methods approach. You have the scientists, but it's also important to get the people that's been at the ground floor. And people like that. So, Ethan, do you have anything else before we continue?
Yeah, sorry. Did I lag out? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I figure we're talking about shipwrecks and my computer crashes. That's pretty funny.
Look into if you haven't already. It's called AIS. Or
Yeah.
it's God, it's not artificial intelligence. I mean, it is a form of artificial intelligence, but it's called automatic identification system.
Okay.
All ships have it. It pretty much negates collisions is what it does. It allows a ship, say you're on a ship and I'm on a ship and we're 50 miles away from each other. AI, all commercial ships are required to have it. You would be able to see on your GPS plotter the name of my ship, the direction I'm going, how fast I'm going, and what my port of call is. That right there gives you enough information to call me on the radio if you need be, and you can tell, directionally where I'm going,
Get out of my way.
how fast I'm going, in order to avoid a collision. So that's one of the most important forms of AI on a ship that I personally use, and would love to see more advancements in, as far as response time goes.
Interesting.
Because it doesn't update it updates maybe every couple minutes. I'd like to see an update every second.
Real time.
Yeah, real time, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the most important parts of AI on all ships, and all commercial ships are required to have it by law. That's a good thing to look into if you haven't already.
Yeah, that
Interesting.
I have seen a little bit of that, but also to my last point about the completely autonomous AI ship, I was opening up the tab and then everything shut down because my computer, you can't do two things at once. It's terrible. But it's run by IBM. So if you Google IBM autonomous ship, you'll find like a Business Insider article that I use. You also have a link to the website. So if anybody's interested, that's how you can look it up.
Okay. Appreciate it. I'm looking
My
at it.
pleasure.
Thanks a lot. So, Tyronic, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. Because I guess from being in the Marine Corps, being on like the Marine Expeditionary Unit, the deployment, you learn a little bit about like these canals and the political presence of the canals, pretty much. So I was down in like the Gulf of Aden, down by the Horn of Africa, and you learn about the Red Sea and the Suez Canal and the political power and how much money rose through those canals, even like the Strait of Gibraltar over there by Portugal. So I guess my question was, what contingencies are there for getting around not just these these shortcuts, pretty much these canals, because I think it's about like 10% of the world's like the global market trade that runs through these canals. There's so many problems all the time, it's things that AI can't predict, such as like like the presence of like war, or the one country that just wants to shut down the straits, pretty much. So is there any like contingencies to actually go around these shortcuts, or is there just so much global trade that everybody just goes through the same way, and they just hope for the best, pretty much, and tomorrow, if they want to shut down the strait or this canal, then everybody's in the same boat, pretty much?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think there's some inherent risk in every sourcing strategy or logistics strategy that's out there, and so hoping for the best is a little harsh, I think, way to say it. The global political or stability, the global logistics stability is really important. And I think you're seeing, just how fragile it can be right now. Contingencies for this, it is tough because contingencies, typically mean something else is going to take either more money or more time. And so those are the trade-offs you need to make, which is, for the good of the business, how much more time, and if you think about lead time also meaning more inventory, so how much more money do I want to invest in inventory to protect myself, to have a contingency, or how much more money am I willing to spend in a different logistics path to mitigate risk? Air freight is a great way to mitigate risk. but it probably costs on the order of magnitudes of hundreds of times what ocean freight costs. So it's not really a sustainable contingency, but sometimes you can use it if a product's very critical. So that's kind of what I'd say to your call outs there. It really does come down to, managing the risks more than anything else.
Any other question?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sean, do you have a question? I know you've been on video for a while, so I didn't know if you had a question or not.
No, I've just been kind of listening, and it's very interesting though, like the Suez Canal and everything,
Yeah. All right, excellent.
It's a
Joe,
sorry.
Joe, you got to give me something, Joe. You always asking me good questions. Don't let me down, my friend.
Yeah. So you
No,
mind
Joe,
if I
stretch? So Joe stretch. Joe as a student. Oh man,
Yeah.
Stretch.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Joe, you got all right. There you go.
Okay. I guess circling back to AI, like I'm no expert on it, and I'll admit that right now, but we've kind of touched on how you have to be careful with it, and like not become too dependent on it. Have there been any instances where you've seen it, maybe it's becoming, people are relying on it too much? I guess that's all I'm curious about.
There's some, and this is what I learned, right, from going back to classes, that you can overtrain a model, or you can train a model on the wrong, the model interprets the data or your desired outcome, and it trains itself on the wrong attribute. And so it solves the wrong thing. It looks good, and in 90% of the situations, it'll get you a better answer. But in 10% of the situations, you're looking around saying, what was it thinking? Like, why did it come up with this answer? And, you kind of have to dig in and say, okay, it wasn't optimizing on what we want to optimize. It was optimizing on something else, and it looked good. The outcome looked good in 90% of the situation, but we actually weren't getting it to think through the right problem. So I think you do have to be careful that you monitor these things. You make sure that it's solving the problem you want it to solve, and that you don't make it too reactive to some key metrics, because as we know, things are dynamic. And if you overtrain it on one attribute or a couple attributes too hard, it may not adjust correctly when something new is thrown at it. So, and again, like I've just taken a couple classes on this, but that would be my feedback on that answer. You just, you got to watch that it's trained on the right thing, and you got to make sure the data scientists stay up on this stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I forgot there were two Joes out here. Professor Henwood, were you going to ask the question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys about blockchain, and just, we've been talking a little bit about machine learning and AI, but have you guys been learning about blockchain and how it might be applicable to the supply chain, and get some of your thoughts on that?
So I mean, I think I could speak on it a little bit because I've been doing some extra research outside of class through like the Polkadot blockchain. So I think like the main focus for like the Polkadot blockchain is just in a whole, with the connection between multiple blockchains. I believe that I think that if somebody or some people created some type of AI with so many blockchains and information being pushed through these, like, multiple hundreds of blockchains, there could be like a better way to predict certain industries for supply chain, just for selling and buying, purchasing, and things like that, just from using the previous the previous data to get the forecasted data. But the blockchain is just so, I guess, like dynamic and untapped right now that, you know, it could be something that could trifold the supply chain industry rather than keep it, you know, stagnant or trying to rush to get to where everybody wants to go, pretty much.
Yeah, good. And I like that you brought Dot up there. That Polkadot is a great project. You know, specifically because it's trying to bridge some of the gaps, as you said, across blockchains. If you think about that a little broader, that also may imply that they're creating standards across blockchains, which could be, you know, another critical element for supply chains to adopt it. Because of course, my vendors are not just my vendors, they're vendors of other companies. And so does every company have their own blockchain? At what level do you put that blockchain? You could have hundreds of thousands of blockchains if everybody went after it themselves. You need some way to have, you know, blockchains standardized.
Yeah,
so
governance,
that,
blockchain governance. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think Polkadot is an interesting project for that reason.
Yeah. I'm a Polkadot fan, that's for sure. It's trickling into the students that have interest.
Yes, yeah, it's a good one.
Ethan.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research for my business writing class on cryptocurrency, which obviously, if you're going to talk about cryptocurrency, in a sense, you're going to end up talking about blockchain. And I can only speak very little about blockchain because I haven't gotten into the depth of it yet. But in a way, the way cryptocurrency works is that you end up, you probably all know this already, but you mine it essentially. You're going to have this computer hooked up to electricity internet, and it's going to mine and gather and solve puzzles to create either Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency. And whenever you create a cryptocurrency, it's not going to be really regulated unless you have a blockchain behind it. You have to create a sort of accountability in a sense. You have to be a list. And blockchain so far, it's prevented so much fraud and theft and like direct attacks on cryptocurrency. It's outstanding. So it really should be implemented in almost everywhere.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get there one of these days.
Yeah, it's not gonna be overnight, but I mean,
Yeah.
I try to talk about blockchain, and like I tell you, you can lose a lot of people with blockchain, but at the end of the day, all it does is increase transparency, you know, and that's why I say it increases transparency, and that's pretty much it. Just like with cryptocurrencies, it increases transparency. And I was on a phone call with an individual at like 3 o'clock this morning. He's in the Bay Area actually, and he was talking about creating a use case in the mortgage lending industry, right? So you know you have all of these unneeded fees whenever you buy a house, right? But if you put all that information on a blockchain, now you're cutting out the middleman, and now it's transparent. You know, so that's one thing that we're speaking of, and it's all about transparency. At the end of the day, it's all it is. You know, and that's the biggest gap whenever we talk about supply chain management is transparency. You know, and that's when I speak at these conferences. That's what I say. So some supply chains are complex for a reason, you know, and some of these people have things to hide. You know, there's greenwashing in the supply chain. We talk about greenwashing a lot in this class, and I think that, you know, blockchain is the answer. And like I explained on our phone call, you know, there's people who've actually tried to get a rise out of me, you know, on LinkedIn, you know, to say that, you know, I'll make bold statements to say you have to make your transactions transparent, but that's what consumers are going to want. That's what consumers are going to want. And if your competitors are going to do it, then they may potentially go to your competitors. And a lot of these companies, they already have blockchain, but you don't even see it. It's on the back end. Amazon has a massive blockchain that we don't even see. You know, one of the big healthcare companies, I'm not going to say who it is, one of the big healthcare companies has a lot of those internal transactions, all that internal data that's on the blockchain. So you have a lot of these companies that already have blockchain, but they're not making it public. But the more adoption we get, the more those people are going to come out. Oh yeah, we had blockchain for 5 years now, right? We've already had the infrastructure in place, So you're gonna see more of it. But in terms of wide adoption, we're still like 5 years away from it. You're going to get quicker adoption with artificial intelligence, because if you do not adopt artificial intelligence right now, you're going to get left behind. You're going to get left in the dust. So, but we're at the foundation of blockchain. I'm doing some work with the Web3 Foundation, where I think that's the future. We're going to decentralize the net. We're going to decentralize the web. And yes, we're years away from it, but we're only months into it right now. And that's where I think that we're going with blockchain. And as I said in our discussion, I'm trying to put an ERP system on a blockchain. People say I'm absolutely nuts, but I listened to a podcast with Mark Cuban last week, and he said my most successful companies. He said everybody said I was absolutely insane. He said those are my greatest successes. He said whenever I explain an idea to somebody and they're on board, it's not crazy enough. I go back to the drawing board, right? And I said, people in 2019, people said I was nuts talking about blockchain, in the industry. I said that led to 5 TED Talks, and the thing now everybody's kind of listening. And now I'm talking about Web3 and the decentralized web. Now people think I'm crazy again. So I'm on to something. Right. And that's where we're going. That's where we're going in terms of blockchain and supply chain management, in terms of accounting, in terms of everything. Right. It's just not supply chain, it's everything. And now you're taking the power out of the hands of the Googles, of the Amazons, of the Facebooks, and you're giving the power to everybody. And people say, well, Justin, people are going to be going. You're trying to go up against the Facebook. You're trying to go up against the Facebook, the Facebooks, the Googles. I said, I'm not trying to go up against them. I said, yeah, they can crush me. They can't crush everybody though. That's what the decentralization is going to do. And you've seen the government try to do it. The government tried to stop Bitcoin. They can't stop it. And now Janet Yellen is trying to create this stable coin for the US government. Nobody's going to touch that thing, right? We already have stable coins. We don't need your stable coin, US. So sorry, too late, right? So I think, and again, you're putting the power in the hands of the people, and that's why blockchain is going to be so powerful. It's going to give the power to the people. It's going to increase transparency. That's just my thoughts on that topic. Any other questions?
I'm going to call on some random people, just see if there are questions out there.
Yeah, here we go. Let's go.
So Stephanie or Abigail, we've talked a little bit about AI and global disruptions, and we've talked about blockchain. These are pretty big, heady topics. They're new. So Stephanie, Abigail, do you have any questions or concerns about the use of AI or blockchain, and what are your thoughts on that?
I had a question, not focused on blockchain, just on your company, Levi's.
Yeah.
So recently I've noticed Levi's popularity has increased by a lot. Have you guys noticed it? And when did it start, I guess? Has your company fell at some point and then rise?
I think every global brand has probably, fallen and risen in popularity at some point. And it really comes down to, I think, a couple things. One, we've made really big strides to try and be the company on the outside that we are on the inside, and vice versa. I think in today's age, where if you're not who you say you are, right? And there are companies that are like that, where they'll put one thing out through their marketing organization, and then internally they're completely different. I think if you are authentic and you are genuine as a company, and you resonate with the population, your popularity these days will rise. And I think Levi's is trying more than anything to be as authentic as we can. And I think that's kind of paying off. A lot of our marketing, it just kind of speaks to, you know, who we try to be. And I think it's resonating. So that's, I guess that's the best way to answer that.
Yeah, definitely.
love
Because
that.
I like resell things online also, and I have noticed a like a really large rise in Levi sales, and they go for like $50, $60 when they're used. And that's like what new Levi's in your store cost. So that's what I find like really interesting right now.
Yeah, and what you're talking about too, I love you bringing this up, because when you've got a quality product that can be used again, it begins to create a sustainable supply chain and a circular supply chain. And this is something that I think is also going to be very, very important coming up here, which is, you know, how do you create a supply chain that can give back, right? How do you create a supply chain where your products can be used again in multiple ways by multiple end users? So you reselling Levi's is a great way of sustainability. When those jeans finally fall apart at some point, if they do fall apart at some point, they can be used in housing insulation because of the cotton quality in them. So there's some great things coming up on sustainable supply chains.
I have a question on that. So have you ever, is there any kind of discussion in terms of like creating like that circular supply chain where you bring in some jeans that are falling apart and then you repair them and put them on a secondary, put them on like your marketplace like Patagonia's doing? Like, is there any kind of,
Yeah, you know, I don't have the details right now that I can speak to, but certainly that is a thought right now. Really controlling your brand, really controlling, you know, that second usage type of market for sure.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And we have like about 10 minutes left. Any other questions, anyone? Just any general questions?
I'm going to go on to page 2 and see if I
Our professional Henwood was going to call you out. So are there any questions?
can, let's see. Sheila Carr. I'm calling on you just because I knew an Allison Carr and I saw your last name. So what questions do you have and what thoughts are on your mind?
I don't really have questions. I like to ask speakers, was this like your first choice in like a career? Like, what was your first choice in a career?
That's a great question. And truly, I think, you know, when I was coming through, Penn State had the best logistics program in the nation. But having said that, you know, there are only maybe 5 great logistics programs out there. And I can name a few of them, which were, you know, Michigan State, Tennessee, Penn State, and I'm forgetting like 4 and 5. But it wasn't a well-known major. So I did not go to Penn State to become a logistics major or a supply chain major. But once I found out about, you know, how great Penn State was and how fantastic the professors were, I went for it. And like I said at the beginning, it has done nothing but put me in a good position throughout my entire career. I find that my supply chain and logistics education from Penn State helps me talk across multiple functions in the organization. You know, you have to understand sourcing and purchasing and transportation and warehousing. And when you can look across multiple functions like that, you naturally have a stronger voice within a company, and you naturally are seen as a leader or a coordinator if you can tie those pieces together for others. So if you can translate, because of your understanding from a supply chain management program, what the purchasing organization is saying to the logistics organization, that's power. Because inside functions, I think what you'll find is that people speak different languages even within the same company. And supply chain management as a function has the ability to translate. I often refer to us as the Rosetta Stone of an organization. And if you believe in yourself, if you believe in your education, if you believe in your ability to help organizations work together better because of that, you're going to be well suited for your career.
That was amazing, actually. Excellent answer. Anyone else?
I have a question. Did you have like a backup plan for your career, or did you like stick to that main goal, like a career?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going back 26 years now. I think if I had a backup plan, it would have been business school, right? So if I got in and I didn't like something, the MBA program could have put me on a different track. But I'll tell you, I went to Cornell because it had a great operations program. And I came out of Cornell with a confirmation that I really enjoyed supply chain. What did I do while I was at Cornell that really helped propel me? I realized I didn't have a great financial or accounting background. So I kind of minored in supply chain when I got my MBA and really focused on the finance and accounting side. So coming out, now I was a supply chain guy with all the financial acumen that really could push me to the next level. But no, I really never wavered. And if I had the MBA program, probably would have been the time.
So do you think you would have went into the financial area? Whenever you say MBA, you would do more financial?
Well, that was just because my undergrad, I didn't focus on the financial side. And,
Okay.
and I feel like the one thing I noticed coming into a lot of businesses at the entry level in supply chain, you're a unit-based person. You're dealing in the units. But what leaders want to talk about and what drives business are the dollars. And so if you can figure out the conversion from your units when you're talking to people into dollars to talk to leaders, that makes a ton of difference. And then not only being able to create, a unit to dollar ratio. So, I think back in the day, like the tub of margin was $4 per unit. So if I had 10 units, I was talking $40 in revenue, right? That type of thing. But then if you can start to figure out how your units begin to flow through the financials, how does it impact cash flow? Where am I taking inventory reserves because my product, is obsolete and not as much as I bought it for? All those types of things in the financial statements will really help you make better decisions as you move up through the organization. So I found pairing the finance side with the supply chain side was a very powerful combination.
And I just call it out because we refer to that as unicorns. So if we can find an undergrad with operations and supply chain experience that just remotely likes finance, oh yes, that's a unicorn.
Yeah.
Even in management consulting, that's a unicorn because you rarely get someone with that blend, even in consulting. So that's why I wanted to, because I'm not financial, and I've told them multiple times I hate finance. Right. So I leave it in those areas. And that's kind of why, I stayed in my operations side, but I try to be the best at it, so that's where I came from. Does anyone else have a question? So we have like 4 minutes left. I think someone came off mute. All right. So Professor Henwood, I thank you for your time. Like I said, I love these conversations, and that's typically how I I do my guest lectures. We just introduce yourself and we have a conversation, and we covered a lot of things. We talked about the metrics that Levi's had. We talked about supply chain disruptions. We talked about technology. We talked about what's the future at Levi's. So if the students want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach you? Ask any additional questions.
Yeah, you can do it a couple ways. I think the best way for me to sort the inbounds, because a lot of times if things come through my work email, they go to my spam box. But if you want to go to LinkedIn and just email me through my profile, I'm pretty good about responding via LinkedIn. And then we can connect as well, and I can watch how your careers progress.
That's what it's all about. So it's all about. We got three minutes. Anyone have any quick questions? All right. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to be uploading a discussion, based on this class. So as always, if you have any questions, just shoot me a text message, shoot me an email, and you all have a great week.
Okay, you too. I may email you sometime later in the week about the assignments. I don't know, about maybe the poster.
Okay, sounds good.
Professor, I actually have a question. I was waiting for everyone to leave though.
Okay, yeah, you can. Everybody can drop. If you have any additional questions, you can stay on. All right, Domina, go ahead.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Wait a minute, Joe. Is this question for me or for Joe?
No, it was for you. It was about the project.
Oh, okay. All right. See you, Joe.
I'm sorry.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
I'll connect with you. I'll send you a message on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right. Thanks a
Bye.
lot. See you.
Okay, so for our own